Hello everyone, Argsy here. Today we're going to carry on looking at how to add custom textures into Farming Simulator 22. Specifically how to add textures into a map on its own rather than changing the base game files. Now, if you haven't seen already, we did do a video on custom textures and how to overwrite the default game files. So using Bullet Bill's wheat texture, we put that into our base game files and you could see how that changed. But today we're going to take a look at how to add Benji FS's maize textures. So we've planted a section of corn here, as you can see the whole way through at all the different growth stages. So this is the base game corn, this is what it looks like now. So we're going to go in and change that texture, so when we load the map up next it will look like Benji FS's, which is a lot tighter. It has weeds and grass and things like that down in the bottom and looks a lot different. It has some crop destruction of the stubble and things like that as well. So that is the plan. We've also planted some oilseed radish. We may take a look at how to go in and change the oilseed radish texture as well, because that is a little bit more of a in-depth process. So first things first will be the maize textures, and as one final thing we will go in and have a look at how to change some of the ground textures, and specifically using Antler 22's plough textures and a couple of ground textures that they have there to replace in the map. So we're here, this is the competition map. I've chosen this one specifically because it does not contain any custom textures at all. It uses all the base game fruit types, all the base game textures and everything like that, to the point it doesn't even look at a custom fruit types XML file in the map structure. So we'll have a look at how we can add that into your map. Some maps will have their own fruit types file already, so you won't have to add that in. So it's a little bit of a case by case basis. So as you go through, you'll be able to learn how to do that, and hopefully I'll be able to explain it clearly enough so depending on which situation you come across, you'll be able to figure it out for yourself. So we'll jump out of game now. We're going to go and take a look at some files, at some XML, and figure out exactly what we need to do. So first things first, you can see that all the different zip files I've downloaded of different textures. Now we're going to have a look here at Benji FS's maize pack, so we're just going to open that and have a look at what we need to do. I always like to look and see what's involved with installing any textures or anything like that before actually diving in and doing it. So you can see we've got the maize folder there, and you can see all the different level of details, the view diffusers, distance diffusers and things like that for changing the maize. We go back a step, you can see we've got some install instructions which we'll bring up there. Can be used as standard or with crop destruction. Basically unzip and paste the contents of the maize folder into your maps foliage folder. Now this assumes that you have a maps foliage file, so we will go through that because I know the map we're using doesn't. And there's an image there showing you what you need to do, and then there's also instructions on how to replace the maps fruit types there as well, so you can scroll down and we can change that. Now this map also does not have a custom fruit types file, so we will go and look at where we find those. But just taking a look here, Benji's provided an example of the line that's required to be changed down here in the fruit types, so that's pretty clear. And then also a very helpful graphic showing what needs to be cut from where and where it needs to be placed. And like I said, this is differ a little bit depending on your map setup and structure, but we will go and take a look at that now. So to be able to edit our map, the first thing we need to do is unzip it. So we've got the FS22 competition map there. The biotank is a dependent mod for this. I'm doing this in my mod folder at the moment. Where you do it doesn't really matter. Just make sure that when you go to open the map in the future, you only have one version of it, whether it is zipped or unzipped. But we've also got easy deb install deliveries, just as a couple of tools there that I found helpful. But to start off, we're just going to right click here on competition. Click extract all, and that will extract to the folder and create a folder in here with it, with everything unzipped. So then we have better access and are able to edit everything. And there we go, that's popped up there. If we just bring this window back up, you can see that's that unzipped there and has exactly the same content in it. So a little bit about the mod structure in a map. Every map I've come across has been different. This has the mod description file. Now that's what the mod hub and things reads, what the store reads when it tries to describe what the map is all about. We've got the icon there for the map as well, and then always have a folder there which has a whole lot of different things. You've got your main map i3D. If you're opening it in Giants Editor, that is what you would open, and then you can see there is a whole lot of different XMLs through here, farmlands, items. These are all map specific obviously. We've got some data files in here which have all the different PNG files for your different paintable textures that are used in the map, and you can actually start to see sort of the shape there and line of the river in the middle of the map. Some placeables which are used in the map, and then we've got some custom textures in there as well. So this is actually where I'm going to be dumping the maze file textures into. But what we don't have anywhere is a fruit types XML. So we're going to go and find that, and we're going to bring that into here. We're going to set up where that needs to go and point the map to use that customs fruit types XML. So where do you find the fruit types XML to be able to use? Well, if we go into this tab here, which is our farming simulator file, Steam Apps Common Farming Simulator 22, we will go and find exactly where that fruit types XML. Under data, under maps, and then right here is the maps fruit types. Now this is the default XML file for fruit types for the entire game. So what we're going to do is take a copy of that, and this is actually the fruit types file that the map uses at the moment. We're going to go back into here, and I like to create an extra file in here. We're just going to call this XML, and inside that XML file is the custom XML for the fruit types. So the name, structure, everything like that remains exactly the same. Now this is the file we will open up to change the crop destruction to in just a little bit, but let's jump back and have a look at how we need to point the map to look at that XML file. So back again here in the root file for the FS22 competition map, back under our maps, we're looking here for this map.xml file, and this is the one that contains all the locations for different files and which files the map should use to be reading for creating the different things like the fruit types and fill types and anything like that that might be customized. So if we just double click on this to open it up in Notepad++, so hopefully I've made that a little bit bigger and it's a bit easier to read, but just if we have a look through here, you'll see that there's a few different things that you can see with some XML files. Now where it says $data, this is telling the map to read the files that come out of the base game. Anything that says $data will be reading the base game files. So the environment files, the map's growth, weeds, field, ground, they will be coming out of that file. Anything here that doesn't have the $data tends to be read by the map file itself. So the sound maps/sound. If we take a look back here, if we go to maps, you'll find there's a sound.xml. So that is the sound.xml file that this Notepad++, this file, the map.xml, is looking for. So what we're looking for in here is the fruit types XML. Now if I just scroll down, you can actually see this is it here. So it's been commented out, which basically tells the map to read the base game one. It's not using a custom one. So I'm just going to take off the back of this these brackets, the exclamation mark and the dashes, and you can see that has now changed color and it's telling the map to look for fruit types under a certain file. Now this is still pointing to $data, so it would be using the map fr maps fruit types XML. We need to go back and point it to the fruit types XML that we just put in our folder, which was, having a look back here under XML, and we can see that path maps XML and maps fruit type there. So I'm just going to come in here and copy those two pieces, maps and XML, and then we're going to go back in here. Now the bracket's going to be the wrong way around. We need to make those match. We've got maps and XML and maps underscore fruit types, and that should point to maps underscore fruit types right there. So now the map is using a custom fruit types that we have in our file to be able to read that rather than using the default one. So we're just going to hit save on that file, and that should now have overridden the map XML. Just have a look there, it's got the updated time and date about 5 minutes after we unzipped the file. So there we go, that is that all done. Now the next step is to copy those textures from our FS pack, Benji's Maze pack there. We're just going to come in and take that whole folder as it showed in his texture folders. You can see there, take everything out of that and put it in a folder called Maze under foliage. So we're going to have a look back here and figure out where we can put that when we have a look in our map file. This is the map file here for FS22 competition. This is the one we're in. We're going to go into here to textures. I'm just going to dump that under there, and that is our maze. And now you can see all our maze files and everything in there. So what we need to now do is basically point the map to look for this maze.xml, because this is going to use all of this information to build the maze textures. So we've added the maps fruit types XML. We've changed the textures, or brought the custom textures through into the map. We've pointed the map.xml to use the maps fruit types file. But there is one more thing to do, and that is to point the map to using the custom textures. So first things first, we'll open up the maps again, and we're looking for this map.i3d. Now we don't want to open this in Giants Editor, we actually want to right click on it and open with Notepad++, because we're trying to find some reference in here to maze files and repoint these to the the custom files we've just put into our folders. So it's very easy actually to spot this one. Very lucky, maze right here on the top. There's almost 25,000 lines of data in here, so little hint, Control F, and if we just type in maze, we'd go through and find that. So that's a quick way to find what we're looking for. But basically you can see there again, we've got the $data sign. That's looking at the base game data file, at the foliage maze.xml. So we looked before, let's bring it back up in here. Under our textures and maze, we've got the maze.xml. So we're wanting to point the game to look at this file rather than the default base game one. So again, we're just going to go in here. We want to copy these. Now we don't want the maps part, we just want it from the textures onwards, because it is relative to where things are stored. So if we just come in here, we're just going to get rid of the data foliage, then basically just tidy this up. So we want the textures folder, the maze folder, and then the maze.xml, which is under there. Now we should be able to hit save on that, close that down, and we're all just about good to go. Now the only thing that we haven't actually done, and we will just go and do that very quickly, under the XML and the map fruit types, was to change the crop destruction so that the stalks are destroyed when you run over them with your combine or whatever after you've harvested them. So come down here and have a look at our maze. There's our maze section, and we want to have a look here at the destruction, and we've got that line there. Now I'm just going to bring up the folder, and that Benji FS had here under the install instructions. We've got the destruction line here to change, so we're just going to go in and copy that line across, copy that back in here under maze and destruction, and there we go. Can be destroyed, true, from start growth stage 4, end on 9, and state as 10. So let's save that. I'm going to close that down, and I think we should be pretty much good to go. So let's crank up the game. One thing I did want to point out before we go any further is to make sure, depending where you've unzipped your file, that you don't have two versions of the game file in here, or of the map file, sorry. So we've only got the unzipped version of the map sitting in there. I've deleted the zipped version, so it's no longer in our mod folder. Now, contrary to popular belief, you can have unzipped mods in your mod folder, but they won't work on a multiplayer game. So if you're just testing something like this, then it's quite easy to leave it unzipped. You don't have to go through the hassle of zipping it up every time you want to use it. When it's finished, I'd suggest zipping it back up, and we'll go through that in a minute, but let's go and test to see if those changes have gone through. So maps loaded up, we're going to hit start, load into the map. I'm just going to tab across to the vehicles that are over here and go and take a look at our maze, and you can see it is clearly a different texture to what we had previously. Much closer rows. We've got the grass growing in the bottom. As we move along, you can see the rows get much more closed up. It's a much denser crop. Taller, darker green, much darker green, or brighter green, probably the best way to describe it. And again, very difficult to see any rows. And there is our fully grown state. So, like I said, that is the change. Taking a map that has no custom textures to being able to add it in to bring in these custom textures, in this case BenjiFS's maze textures, which I think are actually fantastic. I really like these ones. I think they're a really good change. Obviously not the most appropriate if you're doing a lot of wider growing corn in a row crop type situation, but definitely if you're doing silage, I think this is a good one. So there we go. That's taken me less than half an hour to go through, setting things up, get it all sorted, and going through explaining how to do it to you all. So it's not a long, laborious process to do it by any stretch of the imagination. So with that done, we'll go and have a look. We'll have a quick look at the oilseed radish, I think, but firstly, let's go and have a look at what needs to be done to change the ground textures. So we're going to take a look here at replacing some ground textures. We're using Antler 22's ground textures. We've got cultivated, ploughed and stubble tillage textures there to go and look at replacing. Now, it does say install these in your map, not your mods folder. This is probably one of the least helpful instructions. There's actually no description on how to go through and do this. So we're going to go and take a look and see what needs to be done. So once again, we are going to need to grab these. So I'm just going to grab them in there. I'm going to control copy, and we're just going to go back to our map. CFS22 competition, like I said, good reason to leave it unzipped. You might want to carry on doing some more work. So we're going to go into maps. Once again, we're going to go into our textures, and I think we might just dump those straight in there. You could put them under another folder, but we're just going to leave them there because I think that's probably the easiest way to find them. So let's go back, have a look here back in our maps, because we do want to go through here and find those textures. So right clicking again here on the map XML, we're going to open that up again with Notepad++, and we need to remember what the name of those textures were. So we'll just go back in here, we'll find one of them to use. We'll use the cultivated distance diffuse, so we're just going to type in cultivated underscore distance, or would probably be the best one. So we'll go through, see if we can find that. Cultivated underscore distance, see what that brings up. So there we go. That has found it straight away. Data maps, so $data, it's using that $data again. But we want to point that to where we had the textures. So I'm going to jump back in here. We're just basically straight under that textures folder. We don't want the maps first, we just want the textures. So heading back into Notepad++, that file basically exists in that sort of location there. Textures, cultivated distance diffuse. Now one thing to notice, it does say .png and this is a .dds. That's just the way Giants reads it. It is fine that one says DDS and the other says PNG. And in fact, if we go and find the file path for those default ones, you'll probably find they're exactly the same. So have a look here, data, maps, textures, terrain, ground, and then even distance, cultivator, distance diffuse right there is a .dds file. However, it was being looked at as a .png, so you can ignore that. So that's the first one done. Basically, rinse and repeat for all of them. We'll go back through. We've got the ground type, cultivated diffuse. We've got the cultivated normal. So we just need to go through and find basically all of those. I'm just going to drag that into a position where I can see them. And we'll go through here and see if we can find them as well. And there we are, I've gone through and found them all. You can see them highlighted there. So we've got cultivated distance diffuse, the ground type cultivated diffuse, ground type cultivated normal, ground type plowed diffuse, ground type plowed normal, and ground type stubble tillage diffuse, ground type stubble tillage normal. So those are all now pointing back up in here under textures to these DDS files in there. So once again, we're just going to hit save, close that, pop out of there, and we'll go back into our map. Now one thing to point out as well, when you do edit a file in XML in Notepad++, it normally creates a backup file. Up to you if you save it. I go through and delete it. Likewise with the XML, creates a backup there of that XML. So any XML that you've edited will do that. Again, fruit types has it as well because we changed that crop destruction. So with that done, let's go and start the game up again and see if we can see some different textures in there. So once again, we're back here. We're going to start the map up and go and have a look over in our field. Now I don't think we've actually got a texture in here that's going to have been affected because I'm pretty sure this was set as a seed bed. So we're going to go and find a field over this way. In fact, we're going to jump over the river. Everyone knows my love for this river, but there we go. We're going to jump in this field and have a look and see if we can get this changed. Potatoes growing in here, I don't think we need those. So let's use some easy dev. We'll start off here, we're in field 16. Let's have a look at the stubble tillage. And there you go, that is quite a lot different to the base game one. Very much looking like corn stubble that's been ground into the ground, cut up and chopped as you've run through with that sort of shallower cultivator. So that's one. Let's go have a look. We also had the plowed and cultivated textures. So there you go, quite a different texture for the plowed. A little bit of crop residue still in there, not just the darker. It's actually lighter as well. And finally the cultivated one. And there we go, very similar to the stubble tillage, but basically a little bit less stubble in there. I would have said it looks a little bit finer chopped. In fact, looks more like a straw than it is a corn residue. But that is how easy it is to add custom textures into your map, regardless of what they have. If you don't want to replace it via the base game, it's really, really easy to go through. And in fact, if we're looking at time, it was less than 10 minutes to go through and do these custom textures in here for this crop, for the ground textures. So very, very fast. So that's the basics of how to change your textures for your crops and for your ground in a map specifically, particularly when you've got a map which doesn't have a fruit types XML. Other maps might already have some custom textures or might already direct them to something different. You might find it already has a fruit types XML and might already have the crop textures already in there. So it kind of becomes a little bit of a case-by-case basis trying to figure out which is the best way to do it, but I thought this was a great map to use because we had to go through and point the map to using a custom fruit types, which is very good. So if that's all you wanted to know about, now's probably a very good time to drop a thumbs up on the video and move on to watching something else. But if you're interested in learning about how to change these oilseed radish textures and add in some of the extra features that are available with this, then hang around, because I haven't done this. This is the first time for me. I'm learning as I'm going and explaining it to you at the same time, but I think some of the potential for using this is pretty cool. So let's dive into taking a look at that. We're taking a look here at the oilseed radish information. Now you'll see some of those familiar files. We've got the fruit types there. We've also got a growth file, and the function of oilseed radish that this adds is actually gives it some growth, so it doesn't just go from basically planted to ready to harvest, which is what we saw in our example before using the base game. In here we've got a whole lot of different files. I'm not even going to bother looking at those and trying to understand those. There's some here which I certainly cannot understand, but basically because it introduces a whole lot of different flowering types of plants and just a whole lot of variety into what's being planted when you're planting oilseed radish, I'm just going to assume that all of those there are done correctly. So we're going to copy this across in exactly the same way we did for the maize textures. So just grab that, copy it across, back into our maps file under textures, and we're going to dump that in there as oilseed radish. Now we'll have to go through and basically point to this oilseed radish XML file there, not the i3D, but the same way that we did under the map i3D file when we edited that. But there's also some other things to edit. Now I have taken the liberty of the readme file is all in German, so I've gone through using DeepL. We've translated a lot of that across just to see what it all says. It basically gives a bit of a description here on what the purpose of the changes to the oilseed radish are. Has some things scattered in there, so sunflowers, peas and mustard, which will wither and rot in winter, which is pretty cool. Can be mulched in spring, can be tilled in as a base game for nitrogen bonus, and it can also be mowed just like grass. So it's pretty cool. We can see the different growth stages. You got sown, you got small green cover which is not mowable, harvest maturity 1 which has small ground cover plants and flowers which is mowable, harvester 2 large lush plants with lots of green which is mowable, and then your withered, rotten, almost all dead, and then a mode texture. So those are the textures that we're adding. So let's go through. Basically what we've done, we've already moved the oilseed radish in our mod map, which is there. Now we're going to go into the fruit types. Now it does say we can either do this completely, or because we already have our own fruit types, we're going to open this one up and copy the relevant parts across. So this is the oilseed radish fruit type, so we're just going to scroll to find oilseed radish. Again, we could use the search function, but I suspect oilseed radish is going to be very near the bottom. Here it is there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all of that from basically the opening bracket there, the fruit type opening, and then the closed bracket at the bottom. We're going to copy that across into our maps fruit type. You can see the path up there is correct for that. So again, we'll come and copy that and placed that down through there. So you can see it's extended the length a bit and has some different functions. So that is our fruit type. Just for the sake of tidiness, we're just going to tab that in there, keep that nice and tidy. Now I'm going to leave this open for just a second, because going back to our instructions, you can see that we also need to add some fruit type categories in here. So we're just going to go through. I think I can just copy all of this. So just comparing the two, this is the one we're going to copy, and this is the base one down here. You can see oilseed radish only pops up here under sowing machine and under weeder. But if we have a look here, oilseed radish is now under pickup and also under direct cutter. So that's for forage wagons basically. You can use a pickup for forage or a pickup or a direct cutter for the forage harvesters as well. So we're going to go and grab that fruit types, copy that, go into our XML file, just make sure we're in that competition, yes. We're going to paste that in there, and that has now overridden that one. And then the second part, if we go back to this, is the fruit type converters. So we want to come through here, and basically what this adds is a row here from oilseed radish. We'll convert it from oilseed radish to a grass windrow. And likewise, again, if we're using a mower, so that's for a forage harvester. If you're using a mower, it will convert oilseed radish to a grass windrow. So that's pretty clever to add those into this. So let's go back to that. Back to our fruit types XML, and you can see obviously there's no options under this for oilseed radish, so we should be able to make sure we copy the right part, and I've copied it too, so you can see there we would have an error with the closing bracket. So just make sure that whenever you're copying something, you get things in the right spot, so you've copied the right bits over. So that is the edits done to the maps fruit XML. We're just going to go back and pop and have a look here, and we've got to either replace the maps growth XML completely or copy and replace the oilseed radish for mod maps with customized fruits. So we're going to have to go and find a maps growth XML and make it customizable. Now let's have a look here what was provided with us. This basically is the growth. Scrolling through there, looks to be covering everything. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go control copy, I'm going to go back to our map, back to our XML, we're going to dump that in there. While we're in there, we're going to delete the backup. So we've got maps_growth. We go back in here to our map.xml file, open this up, and now we need to find our maps growth. I just happen to be right on top of it. We want to do exactly what we did down here with the map fruit types, which is get rid of that, and we want to be maps bracket. We have to move the XML in there and that bit there. And now we hit save, and now the growth file is all going to be managed by this maps growth, not by the base game one. So that's those two bits and pieces done. Let's just go back and take another look at the instructions. So we've got fruit type converters, we've replaced the map growth. Now there's also an option here. If you want to mow the intercrop and play with precision farming, you must replace the entry in line 409 in precision farming.xml. Now I'm assuming that's a base game, so I'm not going to go and change that now. I'm just going to leave that like this. Also, if you're playing with Maize Plus, you have to have Maize Plus converter override, XML and fruit converter. So that, again, there's a little bit more that needs to be done, but we're not going to bother about looking at that. I just want to see if we can change these textures to some new textures and have the mowability function of the oilseed radish. So we've changed our fruit types, we've changed our map growth, we've added those into the map XML, we've got the textures in the file. The last thing I think we need to do is go back into the map i3D, find our oilseed radish, which again is right there, and we're just going to copy what we had for textures up the top there. So I think we just go through and replace that, textures, that looks correct, and to make sure that is the right file path, I'm going to jump back up in here, map, textures, oilseed radish, and oilseed radish.xml. So that map matches textures, oilseed radish XML, matches like for like. So that should be us all done. So let's once again close everything down, make sure it's all saved, pop back through the map. Just going to jump in here. We've got that backup file we're just going to get rid of. We've got that backup file we're going to get rid of. And let's go and crank the game up again and see if that has had the desired effect. Once again, the moment of truth, stuck on the start screen. Let's tab across to a piece of equipment and go and have a look and see what's happened out here to our oilseed radish. And look at that. That has changed dramatically. We won't have the different growth stages because we haven't planted it in different strips like we did with the corn. Or it did, but it will only have had the original growth stage first. But you can start to see all these different plants in there now in the oilseed radish. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go and jump over in the tractor. We've got the Horsch Pronto 6-meter planter, or 6-meter seeder. I'm going to head down to the other end of the field. I'm going to plant a strip, skip forward a day or skip forward a month, plant another strip. Do that over and over, and we will see what we end up with. And so 4 months of planting, and we've got 4 different stages of growth. The first one here, this is growth stage number 1, so it is just growing. Here is the second growth stage. You can start to see some things like some sunflowers growing up in there, but also some of the other weeds and flowers and things like that. Growth stage number 3, everything is just a little bit taller, getting up there a little bit higher. And then growth stage number 5 is the crops. You can see some beans, there's some canola, some sunflowers, all of those in there have withered, but we've still got the oilseed radish in the bottom as the cover crop. So everything seems to have worked. Now, one last test I want to do is to run a mower through this and see if we can get this to make a windrow. So we'll go and grab something we can do that with and see how it all turns out. Gone for the easy setup, a little bit of overkill, but the Big M, always an easy way to go through and mow something. So let's just see what happens. We'll turn that on, lower things down, drive forward, and there you go, we're getting some grass dropping. We should be able to, if I change my work mode, I remember how to do that on the fly. Try Y, and we should get ourselves a windrow dropping there of grass. So we do have the ability to mow the crop off here and get ourselves some grass windrow, which we can then pick up and make silage or whatever you want with. Just for the testing purposes, let's spin around and see what happens when we go down this row here with the areas that some have been wilted, withered, and some, so we can't actually mow anything there. We're not getting any impact on that. And just to complete our testing, let's just pop on over this side, have a look. Not mowable. So it's only those two middle growth stages which were able to be mown. So that's pretty cool. There we go. Everything has worked out how it's meant to. So like I said, there is some other options there for changing other things around. Things like the precision farming and maize plus, but if you're just playing base game and want to have this, you can get in here and get a grass windrow on that. Now I think this should also grow back now into more oilseed radish, so we'll just skip forward time another day and see what happens. And there we go, it has started growing back, and you actually notice the withered crop has actually died out completely and it's gone back to a starting growth stage. So pretty much everything's covered, lots of different options. So that's fantastic. Actually, I really like that as a purpose and use for oilseed radish. Throw that in with the conservation agriculture mod that we previewed a couple of weeks ago. Some really good functions and really good ideas that can be applied to Farming Simulator now. So that's very cool. Now there's one other thing I realised I didn't test, and that was the crop destruction, which should happen with the stubble here on the corn. So we're just going to run through this very quickly. And I think, are we getting some stubble destroyed? Let's just make sure we've got our crop destruction turned on. It was turned off, but now that we have it turned on, there we go. You can see the stubble there is getting squashed down and destroyed as we go through. So that would work on forage harvesters if you were cutting this when it was green, or as you can see here with the combine is destroying that stubble as we go through. So awesome, love it, love to see that. It's a it just adds so much realism into a map and into a field when you're driving through and getting that destroyed stubble. We had it on Chilliwack and I just think it looked great, and I do love the grass in the bottom of this. Maybe not appropriate when you're planting corn for grain, but it seems to be when you have it for silage, it does just have that little bit of green growth in the bottom. So very cool. Now the very last thing I want to cover is how to go back and zip your file up once you've finished with it. Now I'm just going to go through and double check that we don't have any backup files. I can't see any in there, none in there. Shouldn't be any in here because we didn't change any of the XML files, we just used the ones that came with the textures. So it doesn't look like it, and then we haven't changed anything in those. So we're going to go back into here. It's as simple for me, this is my methodology, there's lots of different ways you can zip things up, but I just go in here, compress to zip file. It will pop up with a generic name, it'll take one of these 4 files and that'll be what it calls it. But if I just go through here, copy out the FS22 competition, just to make sure it's named exactly right, paste it there, and there we go, that is done. Go back into my mods folder, custom textures, paste that in there, delete the one I edited, and we're back zipped. File's a little bit bigger because we've added those textures in, but that's it all done, easy as. So there we go, that is a look here at how to add custom textures, custom ground textures, custom crops into your map specifically. We've looked at how to change the maize textures here using BenGFS's maize texture. We've looked at how to do some ground textures using Antler 22's ground textures, and we've also gone through how to customize your oilseed radish, as well as adding a couple of features in there on how oilseed radish can be used. So I think a few very helpful things to make Farm Sim an even better experience than what it is under the base game settings. It's great to see modders coming up with some ways to further the game and just improve how it looks, how it functions, how different features perform. So there we go. I hope you found that useful. I hope it has been clearly explained. I know some of those things are a little bit difficult to do. Hopefully I haven't rushed through them and everything is easy enough to read on the screen. Apologies for the lack of any audio across a lot of the segments in game. I was capturing my screen, not my game window. Just jumping between capturing the files and folders and XML and those kind of things. I didn't even think about the fact we'd have no game noise. So there you go. Hopefully the music in the background's more than made up for it. But if you found that useful, please let me know. I'd love to have your feedback. If there's anything else around customizing your maps, your game experience that you'd be interested in learning more about, let me know and we'll see what we can do about trying to do a little video or tutorial about it. But anyhow, that's it from me. I hope you found that useful. Thank you all very much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.